No, I mean, I think that rowing experienced a huge boom, I'd say, in sort of the early 2000s when schools were really pressing hard to sort of meet Title IX
Hmm.
qualifications. So you had a lot of opportunities for young girls to actually, move into the sport.
Hmm.
And for me, it was just I happened to be lucky. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And oddly enough, I was at the only school at the time, public or private, that had a rowing program.
Hmm. This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre. If you're active at all, whether you're running or simply out walking for the day, you've probably experienced one of the number one problems that active people have, and that's chafing. Solpre's all new, all natural anti-chafe balm solves that problem while feeding your skin the vital nutrients it needs to be healthy. If you'd like to stop chafing once and for all and treat your body right, go to solpri.com to check out the anti-chafe balm today. And that's SOLPRI.com. Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today was a winner of the Henley Diamond Sculls back in 2000. He's a four-time U.S. national team member and competed in the Olympics in 2004 as a rower. Today, he still is an athlete and software engineer at a company called Hydrow. That's Hydrow with a W on the end. Welcome to the show, Aquil Abdullah.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. And thank you for mentioning that there is a W at the end of Hydro.
Well, it's phonetic sounding, so you're like Hydrow. Okay, I got it. But because it's I don't know if it's technically a double entendre, but it's an amalgamation of words. Then it's important to make sure the W's on the end. So I bolded that so I didn't miss that part.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So before we got going, you told me you're coming back from skiing. You're already starting the weekend off right. Um, just doing research on you, kind of looking at like a couple short interviews I'd seen with you. I was like, I need to hang out with this guy. You just seemed like a fun guy to hang out with. And you proved it right off the bat, be like, oh, we just got back from skiing, like just my normal day.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's one of those things. This is it's just this been a crazy year. And it's just was, it's last minute decision, but just had to take the family, get them on the slopes. My son, who's almost 3, uh, he just loves it. He just wants to go fast. So
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see how he does tomorrow.
You think he's going to be sore, tired, not going to want to do anything?
Oh no, he follows his big sister everywhere. So he's
Mhm.
gonna be like, I'm all about this. He's gonna be ready to go.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll sleep tonight though. He didn't sleep last night.
Well, I
He
would
kept
think.
coming upstairs. He kept coming upstairs to say to my wife and I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad. And we're like, thanks, buddy, but it's time to go to sleep. And his sister was out cold.
I think after a day um, of skiing that he'd be pooped out. But I guess I haven't been around a lot of 3-year-old energy, so maybe I'm just delusional. And you can tell me about all that.
Nah, he's good. I think we'll be in good shape tonight. So it's good stuff.
So how does that work? I don't know anything about skiing, so let's start there. The like we have I'll say we have a skiing snowboarding venue here, but I'm in Kansas City, so it's not the closest. Obviously, we've got Colorado 9 hours away, well, Denver 9 hours away, but there's nothing terribly ski-y around here, so I've never gone. How does that work with kids? Like, are
Mm.
you taking him on like little slopes? Are you like strapping him on you with a baby Bjorn and going down big slopes? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so basically, I'm getting my workout in as well
Mhm.
because we're basically just on the bunny slopes right now, and I have a leash or a harness, and he's attached to it so he doesn't get away from me.
Mhm.
But so we just like go down, and he falls back and I push him forward, and he falls back and I push him forward, and then he falls forward and gets going faster, and then I have to pull him back. So, I told my wife, I said, like, this is just paying the dues now so that, by the time he's 5, 6, we'll be able to actually go skiing as a family and have some fun. So it's all just putting in the work right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have any kids, at least at the moment. It seems like that kind of is the philosophy in general, right? Put in the work now and it's going to pay off later.
It's kind of crazy. And I think I was trying to think about sort of my athletic career. And I know that one of the things, my dad used to always make me walk, like everywhere. Like he would not pick me up.
Mhm.
And I do the same with my kids. And sometimes my wife is just like, she'll go pick up the kids
Yeah.
when we're on like hikes and stuff. But I think that that's it. Just like, but now I love to walk,
Mhm.
and I think that was part of the origin of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, start them early.
Yeah. Well, it seems like I saw, if you don't mind me mentioning, if you do, we can move on. But I saw,
Move on.
I think you're
No,
also,
just
okay. All right.
No,
Moving on.
just kidding. Just kidding. Go on.
No, I saw, I think on your Instagram that your little girl's in martial arts.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
So I have a martial arts background, so I
Okay.
identified with that. I started when I was in first grade. I can't think of what age that would be, like 6, somewhere around
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
went through the end of high school before collegiate athletics took over. I couldn't do it anymore,
Yeah.
but it's a journey, man. So I just want to encourage you. Basically, after I saw that, I was like, there's something, at least for me, there's something very powerful about it in terms of just being centered, just day to day, not even just like while you're doing it, but just I know I kind of feel like I miss something of myself from that time period where there's like not just a confidence, but like center's the best way. It's like
Yeah.
everything's just a little calmer,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's part, I think, of I'll call it, I won't call it the ritual of sport. I'll call it the ritual of movement, right?
mhm.
Like where you go through this repetition constantly and then you become proficient at it, right? And then you can go to a place where you start to notice things and the transformations as you go through those movements. And
Mhm.
I think that for me, that's been sort of the beauty of what I've seen about her, not only in confidence in terms of like taking martial arts, but also in terms of her going through the different forms now
Mhm.
and becoming better at them, and just watching her confidence in herself, but also just how it does have that centering effect for her.
Mhm.
And she's crazy. I mean, I shouldn't say that she's crazy. She has a lot of energy.
No, it's good though. It's it's such a great venue, I think, because it combines so many, like it's anaerobic, it can be aerobic, depending on what
Yes.
you're doing. There's all the mindfulness required. I remember, so I grew up with a Russian instructor, and when I say Russian instructor, I mean straight from Russia. Like he got out
Yeah.
of Russia because they like I can't remember his entire story, but he spent time in like a Russian prison for being a dissident and
Yeah.
came here and he practiced martial arts while he was in prison and he was a competitive bodybuilder, so big guy.
Mhm.
And I just remember him always, I'll say yelling, but in an encouraging way, yelling. It's like
Yeah.
focus, 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 because it was like just saw I could do better, but I needed that attention to zoom in
Yep.
and just that whole thing. I don't know that I have a question for you. Like I said, it's just a matter of I saw it and I was excited for you and excited for
Yeah.
her to go through that journey because I've been through it. So and I enjoyed it. So
Well, that moment in particular that you saw was when she was graduating from the Dragons, which is where she started, to
mhm.
the juniors, and she's been really excited about becoming a junior, getting her half purple belt.
Mhm.
The whole thing has been, especially through this year, she's just it's been, one of those things we felt like we had to keep going for her just to maintain that consistency. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, man, that was pretty cool for her. She was pretty excited about that.
Yeah. So I'll jump a little bit onto you. Um, I, this is one thing that you're the third rower I've talked to, but the first Olympic rower, so you can
Mhm.
tell that place. I always have to ask because I'm a kid who grew up in the suburbs in the Midwest, so I get like skiing. I'm like, how the heck do you even get into rowing? Like,
Yeah.
where is there an avenue that it's like that I'm gonna get into rowing? The only person I personally know that got into rowing was never a rower, but just like she had a tall build. I
Hmm.
think she played volleyball, and
Yeah.
then was recruited into college to row.
Yeah.
And that is my only personal touchstone with rowing at all. So how do you even get started? Does it a
Right.
matter of you got to live near a coast? Like, what culture am I missing out on?
No, I mean, I think that rowing experienced a huge boom, I'd say, in sort of the early 2000s, when schools were really pressing hard to sort of meet Title IX
Mm-hmm.
sort of qualifications. So you had a lot of opportunities for young girls to actually, move into the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was just, I happened to be lucky. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And oddly enough, I was at the only school at the time, public or private, that had a rowing program.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a bunch of friends who were like, who had been asking me to row pretty much throughout high school. And I was like, yeah, that rowing, that's not a real sport. Get out of here. Come on. And finally, my senior year, I played football. I decided to row in the spring instead of run track.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, it was a lot harder than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And within the course of a couple of months, I was hooked, and I got lucky enough to be offered a scholarship to row at George Washington University. And so that's sort of how it started. I think you look around now and you see a lot more programs, rowing programs for juniors, and and a lot more scholastic programs in high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a part of that is due to the fact that there are opportunities for college scholarships, definitely on the women's side, that have increased. So yeah. So I mean, I think that it's out there, but if you live in, the middle of Idaho, probably not a rowing program around. But you can always just get a single and
Yeah,
knock around.
there is probably a rowing program around town here.
Yeah.
I think part of it is just you know I had an affinity for running, so that's kind of where
Mm,
I played soccer and softball when I was young, and
yeah.
as I mentioned, did karate. But um, I probably would have gone the single route because I played soccer, played softball, did those each 2 seasons, and of the 4 combined seasons I played, my teams won 0 games. And I think at some point I said, I'm done with this. I'm going to do my own thing. I'll be in
Right.
charge, because I was competitive, still
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to win. I don't want to lose every single game we play.
Yeah.
Um, but so that I think that probably led me down that path. But I grew up like middle class, lower middle class suburb.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have this perception of rowing as like a high class sport, you know,
Yes.
and triathlon's kind of that way too, because triathlon is darn expensive.
Yep.
Doesn't I mean you can get into it for maybe $500, but if you really get into it, you're thousands quick.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much a boat costs, but it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like the average thing that everybody would
No.
have. So
Yeah, so in terms of access, that is something that is really near and dear to my heart right now. I participate on the National Rowing Foundation. I'm a board member.
mhm.
I don't know if you've heard of A Most Beautiful Thing. It's a movie that's out. It's about the first all Black high school rowing team
Okay.
out of Chicago, west side of Chicago in the 90s. And that, so like I'm really working to make sure that we can get that access of the sport, because as you said, like boats are not cheap.
Yeah.
However, if there is a school program around, if there is a community program around, then you can show up, and there's a pretty good chance that you'll be able to get into a boat. So that's not the limiting factor. But as you said, there's other barriers like, cultural and things like that, like I don't know the sport of triathlon all that well. One of our athletes at Hydrow, Nick Karwoski, used to be a triathlete, or probably maybe still does them, but I don't know what the demographics of triathlete, the triathlon athletes are like, but I can tell you in rowing that at least in the United States, it's predominantly white. So
Yeah.
there is that perception.
It's definitely similar. I think like when USA Triathlon, they'll publish their stats. Like if you want to look in the magazine to try to get advertising or whatever, they'll say, average household income's like a little over $100,000. And I went to these elite development races. There's only a handful. There's like 3 or 4 of them every year. They're draft legal and follow the same format as the Olympic format, but for amateurs.
Right.
Which can be dangerous if you're just doing anybody, which is why there's only a few of them and it's invitation only.
Yep.
But they'd have junior races there, and it's mostly, young white kids with parents that can afford to fly them to Florida with bikes, and there's a lot of cost barrier there where, even just like middle class doing well family may not be able to afford that. So that limits a lot of people from participating. And even if they can participate, like I said, you can participate on a local level, but then progressing up gets difficult quickly.
Yeah. But the thing that I tell people that, about rowing, because we think of like Ivy Leagues and Oxford and Cambridge and all of that. I say the guys that rowed on the team with me, there were guys from Temple, SDSU, Ohio, Wisconsin. So it's, there were guys from all over that had made it to Oregon, so while it does have this perception, I think that if you look at, at least the years that I was competing, there were guys with, from all over, at least in terms of the schools that they went to.
Right. Well, I want to back up a little bit because,
sure,
you had talked about you played football, and then, most football athletes in high school, at least that I know, are encouraged to do track, as you mentioned, and you decide not to do track. What mindset shift, what changed your mind there? Because you went from no to I'm going to go out, and then things progress. So what's the point of inflection?
I wanted to party, but I wanted to stay in shape.
Okay.
Like it's my last year of high school.
Yeah.
I was going to play football in college. My dad played football. He wanted me to play football. I liked football, but I didn't want to be I didn't see myself being a football player. My dream wasn't to go to the NFL. That wasn't I enjoyed my team. I enjoyed the guys I played with. I enjoyed just sports in general. So I knew that crew was tough, but I didn't know how tough. And so I was like, I'm going to do this spring. I'm going to stay in shape. I'll still run, but I'm, and so I was going. This is the story. You can ask my mother if it's how truthful it is. But
I'll get her on next time.
I was basically walking down the stairs to go to Beach Week, and I hadn't decided whether or not I was going to play football or whether I was going to row in college. And she said, she was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and she said, "You're not leaving the house until you just tell me what you're doing for school next year." And I didn't want her to go outside because I knew that there was a trunk full of beer in the back of the car. So I didn't want her walking out with the bags. So I had already made the decision. I just needed that forcing function to say, like, I'm going to row. And it really was, I tell people there was probably like 3 months of rowing in high school when I went from sort of just where I started to get it, where I was like out on the water, and like it was a meditative type of thing we were talking about earlier, about how you get into that zone, that zen, how you can focus. And when you have 8 boys in this case, moving almost together, with me being the odd man out, I got thrown in with the varsity team and the JV team, because I had the strength to do it. And so they were like, we got to get him up to speed and get rowing well so that he can compete, and so that's sort of the journey that I took, was one where I enjoyed football, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I saw it more of a vehicle for getting an education than I did as like, I'm going to go to the NFL. And so that's sort of the transformation took place. It's like, oh, I can still get a scholarship and not get hit. I'm in.
It's not such a high rate of injury. It's like, we hold up. I feel like I talked about this. I've mentioned this previously with other guests, but Kansas City is now doing pretty decent in the NFL.
Your football team's doing
finally. But when people around here, they still get like pains. Like if things start going wrong, they're like, oh, it's the old Chiefs again. But I'm like, man, it's part of it is part of the whole season, and this showed up, I think, hugely in the Super Bowl. It's a war of attrition. If you lose your guys, what are you gonna do? So like injuries play such a huge part, and I don't think average Joe thinks so much about how easy it is to get injured, even though those guys are enormous. It's like, Mahomes himself has knee spun around and foot messed up, ankle, like all those little stuff. So I don't fault you in the least for saying, I don't want to get hit anymore. I'm going to go row and then be able to get up and walk in the morning instead of just wanting to lay in bed and not go to class. So walk me through the timeline from college to trying to make the Olympic team. Like, where are we years wise? Is there overlap? I think I kind of missed a little bit on the timeline there.
So basically, I finished up at GW around 96, and then I actually went to the Olympic trials in 96 and came in 4th in the single. I started rowing, and so this is sort of the tale that this is like, after my freshman year, I went to sort of a rowing development camp, and it was coached by Tony Johnson. He was the coach at Georgetown at the time. And he told me, said, I got a lot of good guys coming down from Dartmouth and Yale and so on. In Georgetown, they're going to be here. So why don't you try sculling? So in rowing, there is sweep with 1 oar, and that's what you predominantly see in college and in the movies. And then there's sculling with 2 oars. And so that's sort of the route that he sort of guided me into. And I think that was actually really good for me, because it was something that I could do by myself. It was something that I could start to, much like yourself, I could get better at, and I could do. And so by the time I was graduating from GW, I had become pretty proficient. Now, that being said, I did flip in my first race. I was rowing my coach's boat. And the coach at GW at the time was John Devlin. I
Mm-hmm.
was rowing his boat, and it was older than I was. And I took maybe 4 strokes in my first race, and the oarlock broke off, and I flipped into the water. So I always like to tell that story because, it's easy to think that like people take routes and they're good right away. You were
Mm-hmm.
talking about attrition, and in sports, a lot of times it is attrition. Like there's guys that are better than you, and there's guys that are not as good as you, and you're putting in your time and you're improving, and somebody retires, and boom, you get your shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that like the one thing that I love about sports and sort of rowing in particular that I found is that you always have that opportunity to get better, to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so basically what happened is after college, it wasn't, there's a couple of paths to making it to the national team. One, in college, you're identified, you get invited to national team camp, and you're training at camp, and that's how it goes. I wasn't quite good enough to make it to the camps right
Mm-hmm.
out of college. So I rowed at a club. I rowed at Potomac Boat Club in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And there I was just lucky to be around a bunch of amazing athletes that were really pushing at a high level to get better and to actually make it to that next level. And soon enough, I did. I got the call up to row at the camp in Princeton, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I'll tell a story. Like it's not easy. For about 2 months while I was trying to make it to that level, I lived in Tampa, Florida, in a 2-bedroom motel with 3 guys. We had 2 beds. We rotated who would sleep in the bed and who would sleep on the floor. We had a microwave, so we ate like eggs, tuna fish sandwich, and peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner of the motel's name was Sham. And like clockwork, every week he showed up to get paid, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just one of those things. I was like just trying to rub 2 nickels together to try to, scrape and scrounge and make it. And so when you talk about resources and access to the sport, one of the things that I want to make sure of is if there is anyone that has the potential, that they have the resources to actually make it, so that they don't have to make that decision of, do I have to end my career because I don't have the resources, or can I keep going because there is someone there to help me? And so that's sort of what to me like is important today, and sort of like what I can do. But once again, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry. I'm like
No,
in the future now.
you're fine, man. Now I
But,
gotta get my train of thought back.
yeah, so we jumped off. Let's say we're in 1997. I got selected as a spare to go to the World Championships in Chamonix.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, man, Aix-les-Bains, in France. And I tell you, I got to see one of my good friends, Jamie Coven, win the World Championships in the single scull. And that was like, for me, like a moment where I was like, wow, like this is what I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I can make it, and so I worked hard. And then in 99, I went to the Pan American Games, and I won the silver medal in the single. And so I was feeling pretty good about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then 2000 came around. I'd been training in Princeton with the national team. There's all of this talk. Oh, Akil's going to go to the Olympics. He's going to be the first Black male to ever go to the Olympics. And all of that record is playing. And we get to the trials, and it's the best 2 out of 3. And I won, like I did the time trials, heat, semis, and I'm in the final. I win the first final, and in the second final I have an asthma attack, lose the second final, so we've got to go to a third final. And basically I lost the third final by 33 hundredths of a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're a runner, you're a triathlete, 33 hundredths of a second.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. That's a brutal one.
Yeah.
And
you'd rather be like 5 seconds or something like
yeah,
like,
exactly.
all right, it wasn't even like it wasn't. I got beat. It's just how it is.
Right? Yeah. So I lost it, and I was crushed. And a lot of people ask me, like, how did you come back from that? And I was like, well, I was lucky. I had it was the people around me, really. And this is why I really like to say you gotta have a great support system. You have to have be around people that are, in your corner and pushing for you, because the head coach of the national team at the time was Mike Tatey, and we're standing on the dock. I'm standing there. Jamie Covan's there. He knows both myself and Don Smith, who had just beat me. Like I was ready to go to Australia, but now I wasn't going. And he like looks at me, and my parents are standing down at the end of the dock, and he says, Aquil, hold your head up. He says, look down the end of that dock. He says, your parents still love you. It's just rowing. And I was like, wow. I was like, just rowing to you? Like, this is but it helped to put things in perspective,
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, we love sport, and it provides so much for us in the way of opportunity and fraternity and sorority. But, we have that people and relationships are what life is about. And that's part of the journey. And so, but the same year I went and I won the Henley Royal Regatta over in England. And so that sort of put my head right. And I was able to come back and compete for the next 4 years and eventually go to the Olympics in Athens. I've represented the US in every sculling boat, the single, the double, and the quad. And so that has been like a sort of a really, awesome sort of experience.
What always strikes me about, your story, and I think a lot of Olympic stories, I think I wouldn't say for sure, but I would say it probably, if there is a rule, probably more the rule, your story is more similar to everybody else's than an easy pathway. But, think about when we turn the Olympics on, and there's all the pageantry of it that goes on, and it's right on television, and the Olympic theme plays, and the ceremony, and all of it elevates it to this place where it's the pinnacle of sport for all these sports. And I think in some ways, like, disguises or brushes over the part of the story where you're bunking with a few other guys sleeping on the floor, eating peanut butter, like, to get to this moment. It's like, there's all this, glory to be had in this single moment. But it's like, I feel like there's a lot of stories about people, even the people that win at the Olympics, they get gold and then they're like crushed. Like, what now?
Yeah.
That it's that singular moment, and then the floor falls out. Yeah. Especially for those that have to retire. How many times did Phelps retire and come back and retire and come, after 2008? I think he's done it twice now. Yeah. And I don't know, just the whole thing, it is the pinnacle of sport. Yeah. But I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around the reality of the day in, day out work that it takes, even if you have a spot at the Olympic Training Center. Like, I've been to the Olympic Training Center. If you go to Colorado Springs, you can go visit. It's not a 5-star hotel.
No, it's not. And you can easily, in a week or a day, not have a spot at the Olympic Training Center. It's not like, so there's like, oh, I'm here, but I got to stay here, like, it's not like, oh, I'm here now, everything's great. It's like,
and it is that, you're talking about having the right atmosphere. It does obviously lend to a lot of the things you need.
Yeah.
Food being one of them, where you don't have to worry about food. They've got that figured out. They know, what you can eat, and all that figured out. You don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep, at least as long as you're there. All that support. I don't know. Again, not a whole lot of question, just more commentary on the situation and kind of the dichotomy of the reality versus what I think is kind of the mass understanding of what the Olympics are.
So you raised, I think, something that I think you made a point that I think is worth talking about, and that is sort of the way we as athletes sort of view ourselves, right? We are judged by the clock. We are judged by judges. We are judged by ourselves. There's so much in our lives that is about judgment. And whether comes time for us to retire, we have to, how do we now judge ourselves? And I think one of the things that I love about being at Hydrow, where I am now, is that I have been able to expand the way that I think about the world from judgment to curiosity, right? So we can say, oh, I fell down, or, oh, I didn't work out today, I'm a bad person. Or we can say, oh, I didn't work out today. Why is that? Let me try to work out 5 minutes tomorrow or 10 minutes. And as we move from this space of judgment to this space of curiosity, we can be kind to ourselves, right? This is not, we're still holding ourselves accountable, right, for the things that we have to do, but we can be kinder to ourselves. And I think that one of the hard things for me as I made the transition from being an Olympic athlete to being a workaday Johnny, was I still had that competitive nature, and I still do, but I had that judgment that really, was wrapped up in my worth, of who I was and how I moved forward. And I've seen a lot of athletes who, like, once they retire, they don't know what to do with themselves. And I think that I was really lucky in that our coach said, I want you guys to have a job, because if I have to cut you, I don't want to be, I want you to be able to go on, right? And that's a powerful thing for a coach to say, because there's a recognition that, like, you have to be, that there's a whole athlete there, that there's a whole human being there, right? Not just an athlete,
right?
And maybe in not all sports that works, but at least in, I think, a large number of amateur sports, that having something else there is powerful, both for the longevity of the athlete, but also for the emotional and, like, psychological stability of the athlete.
Yeah. Well, and you touch on this, is like, where do we draw our self-worth from? It's and I've been here, I still am here in some aspects. It's like, I think I even talked about this in my last recording with Eric Bell, former pro triathlete. We're only good as our last time.
Yeah.
And if that happened yesterday, that was yesterday. That's not today. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like your self-worth gets wrapped up in that, because it's such a big, part of who you are. So that kind of begs the question: how did you move on? And you find yourself now at Hydrow, but before that, you were a software engineer for several different companies.
Yeah.
How do you make the transition? And then I think before we got going, you're talking about the CEO of Hydrow saying basically they made the company so you could help run it.
No, I think so. Like, I was lucky in that when I decided to stop rowing, there were rowers that were there to say, okay, what do you want to do? Like, like I could have transitioned into finance, or I could have and I could have transitioned into software engineering, and so I had the the gift, if you will, or the luck of people who understood sport and understood, me, maybe even a little bit better than I understood myself, to help me make that transition, because it is hard to be so good at something and then go into a place where you're not quite sure how good you are, and like that's a hard thing to do. And so I got lucky to work, at a company, Interactive Supercomputing, where the CEO was, this guy Pete Peterson. He was just like, he was a hard ass. Hopefully you don't have to bleep that out.
No,
but
you're fine.
So,
yeah.
But he demanded accountability, but he also understood how to build a team, right? And so I think that as we transition, we have to be in places where you have management that understands how to build a team. And that is, for me, I think, been where I've been lucky, is that wherever I've been since, putting down my oars, I've had people who knew how to build a team, as leading the companies that I worked at.
Yeah.
And for me, that was great because they understand that not everybody has the same talent, and that and maximizing the talent that you do have so that you can shine, so that everyone can shine. And I think that, for me, like, that's what I love. Like, there's so much about, where I work now, and how grateful I am to have the opportunity to do what I do at Hydrow. But we have a great team, and we have great leadership, I think. And so, and everybody gets to shine, and everyone is made to feel like that they're valuable. And I think that's part of it, coming from athletics, right? Because sometimes you have coaches who don't make you feel valuable,
right,
and you internalize that, right? And so you have to get out of this thing of, like, you have to get out of that psychology. So yeah, so we got that's a whole thing there, but I don't want to get I don't want to bring it down, but
no, you're right.
You're an athlete. You can. I'm sure you've had coaches who were just
I've had a variety of coaches with different styles and thoughts, and just expectations and lack of expectations. And I think, and I wouldn't call myself a CEO because I have a very small team. But, I think about it, just, I was team captain of pretty much every team I was on from, high school through college, and think about being a leader and what does that mean? And I think that's a couple things, is, like you mentioned, recognizing what people are good at and letting them know that that they're good at it, as well as giving them the opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
And some free reign to do it.
Yeah.
Like when I work with people, I hire freelancers to help me from time to time if I need coding done or if I need artwork done. I find somebody who like I'll speak to the artist point. There's an artist I love working with for some of these products I make. And I say to her, like, I've got kind of an art background, so I can kind of sketch some things. And I just say, this is my idea. Like, you go do it. I don't say, hey, that needs to be red and this needs the blue. Yeah. I just say, I love your stuff. Like, just show me what you got. And very rarely do I have to do anything with, like, oh, let's revise all this. It's like, no, like, I love what she does. Let her do her thing. And I think that's part of, to me, being part of a great leader and building a team is giving people the breathing room, not micromanaging them. Like,
Yeah.
you hired them to do the job, let them do their job.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah. And so, it's kind of crazy, sort of going back to what you said about how, I have a job that was like basically designed for me now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came to Hydrow, um, Bruce and Matt Lair, our head of experience, we went and had lunch and they talked to me, and we were about to have our second child, and I really wasn't up for the risk. And I also didn't get it because I had this idea of what a rowing machine was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be this thing, it had little statistics on it, and it hurt and it was painful and nobody really liked it, but they did it anyway. That was my idea of what rowing was, uh, but having been here, I I realized that this sport, it can be a beautiful experience,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can create a platform that gives people something to feel good about and helps connect them with other people. And that to me has been one of the most amazing things about this past year. I mean, there's a lot that's been sad about this past year.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. But the connection, the ways that people have found to connect
Mm-hmm.
have been, to me, pretty amazing. I feel like I talk to people more, even though it's virtually
Mm-hmm.
now, than I did before. And so being part of a company that is engaged in connected fitness,
Mm-hmm.
thinking of ways that we can help people along their fitness journey, as well as come together uh, and make new friends, has been pretty awesome. But to be able to get out in front of the camera, row, and then come back home, shower up, and then put on my nerd hat and sit down and write some code. That really feeds my soul. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
was like, it seems like it's just going to be a lot of points of joy. I've got an upcoming interview with, gosh, why I just forget his name. He wrote this book called The Happiness Handbook for High Achievers.
Mm.
And here at the end of the month, he sent to me, and it's like, I'm just getting started with it, get ready for this interview. And it's like, that is the point, right?
Yeah.
We want to be happy. Like, people don't think I want to be rich or what. It's like, okay, those are ancillary things. Like, you think
Yeah.
being rich will make you happy. Like, the happiness,
Right.
that joy is what you're after. So it seems like you're in a good place to have lots of joy from just day to day.
Yeah. And it's crazy too. We got our Hydrow back in March, and my wife was like, she's a highly decorated swimmer,
Mm-hmm.
collegiate swimmer, and she used to do yoga and all of this stuff before we had kids. And she wasn't really working out as much as she would like.
Mm-hmm.
That fitness was something that was missing from her life.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward a year, and we got us back in March. She's like connected with a group of women that use the Hydrow. They have sort of their own, they are pushing each other, coming up with their own fitness programs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am constantly amazed at how people have found ways to sort of connect, not only on our platform but on other platforms. So to me, that is something, the bit of joy that I've actually found in this year.
Yeah.
Given the hardships that so many have had to face.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we can take away from kind of a year in isolation is that it brings into sharp relief how needed some kind of social interaction is, meaningful social interaction. I saw an article the other day about like the value of casual friendships, where it's like there are a lot of people, and I have a good friend I met years ago when I traveled to Canada, and we kind of keep in touch. His complaint a lot of times to me is like he kind of moves around, and he's like, oh, it's so hard to make like deep friendships. It's like, well, it is, but like there's also value in just like having a buddy you can see every once in a while. Like you don't have to be like soulmates with a best buddy all the time, just like there's value in just talking to somebody. I get a lot of value just being able to hang out with people like you on Fridays and hear your story, and so I think that's part of what has probably driven people to platforms like Hydrow, where it's like, all right, I know I need to work out. I don't want to go to the gym. I'm not comfortable, whatever. And then I also need to connect. I mean, it sounds like Hydrow's, building steam. Peloton obviously has picked up a lot of steam. All kind of similar idea. Like, let's be connected, but on your own time at the same time. So I think that's one probably good thing we can look at, and just as long as we remember we do need this and it is part of our own health, not just physical but mental health, that like we need to connect. It's such an important thing. But
your comment about casual friendships just had me think about the fact that there are a group of people that I used to ride the train into and commute with that I haven't seen in over a year, some of whom I haven't, seen in over a year. And that's crazy. Like I used to see these people every day. They were in my life, But that's sort of thinking about the nature of like you said, like I knew a lot about them. I knew like people's kids thing, about this thing and that thing. And we didn't really hang out other than the train. Maybe we got together once in a while, but like those, I haven't seen those people in so long. So maybe I need to do like a commuter party or something like that when things are back to whatever the new normal is.
Yeah, we'll see how this year develops. Aquil, as we're winding down, I think you are a triumphant story of finishing this question. If you listen, I don't know if you got through the whole episode that you had talked about listening to with Steve, but this year I'm asking everybody, how do you stay motivated after failing to reach a goal? And it seems like you're uniquely qualified in some ways to answer that.
I think that what I have, sort of, we spoke about it a little bit. I have moved away from judgment. I believe in curiosity and accountability, right? Like you move toward a goal, and if you fail, you can ask a whole lot of questions about why you failed. And as long as you're willing to, and in some ways it's kind of funny because this is sort of like the nature of my mind from the analytical side, is that give me data and let me process that data and let me see if I can do it again and change this and change that. And so I think that one of the ways that we can stay motivated after a failure is to, one, have the people in your corner that will help to nurture your spirit. But the other is to be curious as to how the things happen that happen. Sometimes people are just better than you. If you're like in a race, that's why you lost. Other times there are choices you could have made that were different. And that's why you didn't achieve your goal. But if you don't ask those questions, and if you give up because of that, then to me, that's a bigger loss.
It's a very solid answer. I appreciate it. Aquil, where can people find you, see what you're up to?
Yes.
All that stuff.
You can find me on the IG, the Instagram at Aquil_Hydrow.
Again, it's Hydrow with a W.
Yeah, with the Hydrow with the W, and that's AQUIL underscore Hydrow. Yeah, and you can see pictures of my daughter kicking the bag, kung fu, me zooming down the hill, surfing, rowing, the whole shebang.
Sounds good. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, man. Pleasure's been mine. Good stuff.
Take care.
All right.